Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Rustling Leaves, which is a rather simple roll and write style game designed by Paolo Mori and published by Cosmos. This one takes around 20 minutes to play and can accommodate any amount of players as long as they have a player sheet and a pen. Before I get into my review of Rustling Leaves, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK, and if you use my discount code in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so the contents of the box is going to be these 4 scoring sheets, each representing a different season of the year. And although you'll only use 1 scoring sheet per game, and fundamentally you are going to be playing the same game mechanically, all these different sheets do score in different ways. So you can see essentially that the top half, or the top 3/4 of the sheet, is going to be this big grid of these symbols, and the bottom part is going to be all the different methods in which you can score. The game also comes with 2 dice, which are vary in faces up to 1, I think it's 1 to 4. And also one of those faces is going to have a cloud on it, which can synergize with the scoring methods from the main sheet. So let's talk about how the game actually works, and I'm going to use this previously used score sheet as an example. So all you're going to do on your turn is that you're going to roll the pair of dice there, and what this is going to do is going to show a grid size which you have to draw on your player sheet. So this is going to be a 1x4 grid, much like this one I've done here. Obviously, when you start the game, this sheet is going to be completely blank, and you're all going to start on a different starting area represented by this leaf here. And then what you're going to do is that you are going to draw that grid size over a number of different shapes and then tick off one of the different symbols in that shape, or multiple of the same symbol, I should say. And when you do that, that is all going to correspond to a different scoring method. So you can see here in this particular sheet that if I end up squaring off these trees, I'm going to get 2 points per tree, but I can only ever tick those off if one of my dice is a cloud. So at the moment I couldn't do it, but if I rolled this, maybe I could do a 4x2 grid and try and capture as many trees as I can, much like I've done here. You see I've got a 4x2 grid like this, and I've ticked off all the trees and then correspondingly ticked off all of these here. And I'm going to get 2 points each time I do that. The flowers here work in a very similar way. However, I don't believe you need the cloud. And you're going to get 2 points for each of those, but only when those are odd. So, every time you are coming to an even amount, then they're going to be worth nothing. So you always want to make sure that they are on that odd number or risk scoring nothing at all. You've got the clovers here, which are going to be 20 points the first time and 10 points for every other. And of course, they are going to be a lot more spread out, because they're right on the edges of the board here, meaning that you want to have as small a grid as possible, because if you're going to circle them or square them off, you're probably going to be sacrificing a bunch of other stuff as well. You've got the apples, the cherries, and the peaches, and I believe they all multiply with each other. So it's like 1 times 1 times 2, which I've done pretty poorly here, only getting 2 points. But if you end up getting quite a lot of those, you can probably imagine that that can really build up quite a lot of points. You've got the little bug here, which says you get 3 points only when no clouds are rolled. So again, you can see how it is important that that the clouds come up or they don't come up. You've got these little mosquitoes here. It says you get 15 points if there are no mosquitoes enclosed. So you're actually trying to actively avoid squaring them off in a grid. And you've got this one here to get you 3 points per unenclosed snake. So again, you want to try and keep the snakes out of those boxes. And you can also see here that you get 1 joker, which means you can convert this into any side you want once per game as a bit of a contingency. And as the game goes on and the grid gets smaller and smaller and tighter, of course, the chances of you rolling a number that's going to be quite high, like say you end up rolling like a 4x4 grid or something, which is going to be a big space on the sheet, I might not physically have the room to squeeze that on, much like I have here, where the only empty space I have, I believe, is this 2x4 here. And if I go above that size, then I have to tick off this one here. And each time I do that, I'm going to cost myself -3 points. So it's a game where you need to kind of know when to stop. So that's essentially how the game works. You're going to keep on playing until everybody has decided not to roll anymore, and then the player with the most victory points at the end will be the winner. So I've already shown you this sheet here, but let's take a look at some of the other sheets. So this one here allows you to score 1 point per tree, but you get a bonus 5 points when you have at least 10 ticked off. You've got this one here, which I really like, where if you tick off these flowers, it's going to increase the points you get from the bees. So they kind of synergize with each other. So the more these you get ticked off, the more you want to focus on getting bees. You've got the butterflies, which work much like the other one I've already showed you, but this one scores when you get even amount of butterflies. You get 2 points for each of those. You get pairs of these birds in the same box. You can get 5 points. You get 30 points if you cross off all 7 rainbows on the sheet. So it's a bit of a push your luck thing. You know, are you going to shoot for the moon and try to get all of them, or risk getting nothing and wasting all that effort? You got the ones where the clouds on this board synergizes with these kind of weeds here, where the more clouds you roll, the more these are going to be worth. You've got 3 points per unenclosed bear, so another incentive to try and work against. And even on this map, you're going to get minus 1 point each time that your box crosses the river here. On this sheet here, you're going to score the mushrooms and fungi in quite a unique way, where if you encapture them in the same box, they're going to work against each other. So you ideally want to be enclosing these fungus here, because you get 3 points for each of them. But if you get the mushrooms in the same box, they're going to be worth -2. And of course, naturally, they're going to be really close to each other. So boxing them off independently is going to be quite difficult. You're going to get 12 points for every set of 4 pine cones you have. You've got these rows of these fir trees here where you've got to kind of push your luck and reach the end. And if you do, you can get these big chunks of points there. You've got the nuts and the squirrels multiplied with each other, and you get 5 points for every pair of tree and leaf. And each time you roll a cloud, you have to enclose one of these kind of blowing leaves. And finally, let's take a look at the winter sheet, which by far is the prettiest of the bunch. So on this sheet, you're going to get 1 point per tree, if also enclosed with a snowflake. You're going to get 3 points per fox you score, but you only score these foxes if they are the only fox in that box. So you want to isolate them if you can. You get 5 points per evenly matched pair of these birds and these twigs here. You're going to get 15 points for exactly 5 crossed off icicles. So you're going to walk that tightrope not to go over or under that limit. You're going to get points on these hollies here, based on a die roll at the end of the game. So again, they could be worth a massive 4 points each, or they could be worth 1 point each. So it's a bit of a gamble with that one. You're going to get 12 points if you enclose every moose on the board. And you're going to get 3 points per flower, but only if your flowers keep up with the amount of times you roll a cloud. And finally, you're also going to score a point each time that you cross the river. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Rustling Leaves. So of course, this is a rather simple game, so it's not going to be a massive deep dive into the strategies or anything like that. But I will say that I really do enjoy the way that the designer has incorporated these dice into the game, because this is a completely different concept that I haven't seen before. The idea of rolling the pair of dice, and that is going to be the size of the grid that you are capturing on your player sheet. A real fresh take there. And that can really dictate the approach on how you play the game, because if you're constantly rolling these big grids, then of course that's going to make the game go a lot quicker, and that might tailor your strategy to go towards something rather than something else. Maybe you want to start going for these big grabs here, where you can tick off a lot of things inside of a grid, rather than if you roll a bunch of small grid sizes, where you might want to go for the more niche ones, but will pay out a lot more. So again, I love the way that each time you play the game, it does feel different, and the pace of the game changes each time. Additionally, I do enjoy that restrictiveness of only being able to draw new grids connecting to existing ones. So although it might be great and like a lot tidier if you start really, keeping yourself as neat as possible and giving yourself as much growing space as possible, doing that might not actually give you the best scoring options. So sometimes it's nice to actually have a grid right in the middle, so you have so many options that you can spawn off of. And on top of that, I like the way that when you do and capture these different logos and symbols, it means that you're going to have to sacrifice something else. You're not ever going to be able to score the optimal amount of points because there's always a give and take with every decision you make here. I think the way these clouds have been incorporated is very clever and a piece of minimalistic design, because in each different map, the cloud is going to play a pivotal part, but in a vastly different way. And something that's really helped me get this game back to the table again and again is the way that these sheets are structured, because you can easily see at a glance what all the different scoring things do and how they work differently. But despite them being, quite a bit different in the way they score, they all tie back to the same mechanism. So there's no diversion from the main structure of the game, but within that structure, you have a lot of potential to mess around with the scoring opportunities. And I think this game has pulled that off to a very high standard. And one of my favourite things about this game is the tension of the end game, knowing when to pull the plug and stop rolling those dice. Because, if you end up squeezing the board tighter and tighter and only leaving yourself a few options, then you're going to need to roll very specific things on these dice in order to squeeze a new scoring opportunity in. Where in the reality of it, you're probably going to roll something big like a 4x4 or a 3x4 grid, and you're just not going to have the room to squeeze it in, meaning that each time you do that, you're going to cost yourself a negative 3 points. So yeah, I really do love that idea of knowing when to bite the bullet and knowing when to stop or push on. The game only takes around 20 minutes to play from start to finish, which is absolutely fantastic. Nice and snappy and no room to lose interest or for the game to outstay its welcome. And the same applies to the uptime because you're always ticking things off on your sheet and whoever rolls a die. So always engaged in the game and never sat back and watching other people enjoy themselves. The interaction is going to be a bit of a sticking point for a lot of people because there is no player interaction whatsoever in this game other than trying to beat each other's score. So if you are, if player interaction is essential to you, then maybe this is a miss. But generally, in a game this snappy, I'm perfectly happy playing a multiplayer solo game. And production-wise, I'm actually really happy with the game is produced. Oh yeah, it is essentially just a bunch of sheets of paper, but the sheets are double-sided and the quality of the paper is really good. You also get a bunch of sheets as well, so you've got a lot of replayability there, or a lot of scope to play the game again and again and again, and you're going to get a lot of plays out of it. And even if you're playing at those higher player counts, you're not going to burn through those sheets too quickly. And the dice are also quite nice. Nothing special, just light wooden dice, but they are custom again with those clouds on one face. Okay, so let's get into some final thoughts on Paolo Mori's Rustling Leaves. And I have to say, this game is absolutely delightful. This one's been consistently hitting the table since I've acquired it. It's just got that perfect blend of being accessible, being fast, but still having enough decisions to be engaging. And it's definitely one of those games, while it's nothing, mind-blowing. It's not going to be anyone's favourite game of all time, I'm sure. But it's easily one of those games that fall into that bracket of, yeah, I'll play this anytime, anywhere. And I can never really see myself turning a game of this down because the ratio of decisions to the time it takes, this novelty little tension and restrictive puzzle, it all just blends together in a wonderful, charming little game that I'm actually quite infatuated with. So a big, it's left a big impression of me in a very positive way because, I picked this one up on a bit of a whim, really. It was very affordable. I didn't know much about it, but it left me impressed. And again, if it keeps me coming back to it, it's got to be a good design. So that is Paolo Mori's Rustling Leaves, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this one deserves a shield of quality. So that is Rustling Leaves.